Hey friends, welcome to our weekly American Mussar community gathering. Today we will be looking at our first week of the Soul Trait of Truth. So right now we'll begin, as we always do, with a short meditation. So please relax in your seat and close your eyes and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. Again, inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you go at your own pace of inhaling and exhaling, if thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them go. Like watching a car move past on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems or for planning. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Okay, well, I just had, as I said on my email, I came back from my last retreat as a rabbinical student, and one of our new students, her name's Anna Dyson. She's actually a student all the way from over in England, and she makes these little bracelets, and she's just kind of giving them out, and each one has, I know it's a little hard to see, like some Hebrew letters on it, and this one, which you probably can't read, it says Shema. So she's like, do any of these interest you? And I'm like, yes, that one does. So I'm a big fan of this bracelet, and the kitten is as well. I left it down and she picked it up and carried it around. So I wish she would listen a little better. Um, Today we'll get started with a little bit of a closeout from our loving kindness. And whether you're here or not, how did loving kindness show up for you last week? Was there a particular practice that you tried or was working on? Or was there anything else that may have happened? Or, another way that Musar showed up in your life. So we'll get started with that. Who would like to begin? Yes, Wendy.
Thank you. Well, I got a text from my daughter-in-law, and it had a picture of my grandbaby. And she has a little book she puts together for school, and the little book has questions for her. And this question was, what part of your body is your favorite? She writes in, my heartbeat. And I just wanted to just melt. And I loved that. And I said, well, we're doing loving kindness. And I always look for something to compliment or praise my daughter-in-law on, because there are issues there, with the little family issues between my husband and I, and she and my son. And I just said, thank you, Poppy, for this incredible moment of being able to be loving kind to your mom. She didn't hear me. I didn't say that. So I text Jess and told her, but Benny, you are so wonderful to give her encouragement. And
Mm,
this was a very big deal. And thinking about it, this is a child that had a stethoscope in her hand before she ever held a spoon.
wow.
She has listened to her heartbeat a lot, and I just thought it was incredible. Just inc
Mm,
That was my end of my loving kindness and on to truth.
yes, well, that is a beautiful, beautiful way to end this round of loving kindness for you. Thank you so much for sharing it. Yes, Sarah.
So I have another family granddaughter story. So I too have I have a 9-month-old granddaughter, and my daughter is adjusting to being married and having a baby and her in-laws, and I'm trying to adjust how to not be jealous about them seeming to spend more time with her than me,
Mm,
and sort of tit for tat. But so we had something come up this week related to that. And so my daughter and I were having a little bit of a tiff about it. And, she was getting very defensive. And I somehow was able to say, I just want to do, I love and support you. And I love Ella. And I don't want to make this more stressful for you, because her daughter was sick and I was offering to babysit. And she's like, no, I don't need any help. And
mm,
and her father-in-law babysits 2 afternoons a week.
mm,
And I'm available and I'm trained,
mm,
because Ella had a little medical something going on. But anyway, I try very hard to, I mean, that relationship is very important to me, and it's very easy to, I'm just very aware to, loving kindness and, lead with love, because that relationship to me is the most important thing. And I don't care if I never take care of my granddaughter. My relationship with my daughter is the most important. And I have to, trust her and not,
mm.
and let her do her own thing. It's kind of challenging with kids, got to take what they'll give you or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that, I have to be kind and not, you know, make her hackles go up, because I can be direct and sometimes that's not received that well.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sarah. And yeah, that is such a powerful thing to say, I just love you and that relationship is more important than anything. And, that kind of awareness of relationality and, that's where these practices can really help us in these difficult situations. I mean, we try to use them and lower stress things, but that's an important emotional issue. So really, really so touched that you were able to kind of tap into that. Anyone else care to share?
I made a point this last week of contacting several people I hadn't spoken to in months, and
Mm,
one person years. And the one person I hadn't spoken to in years was recently widowed,
mm,
lives in Rochester, New York, where I used to live, and she's not in good shape. What I did was I called one of our friends who had been a mutual friend maybe 40 years ago, who
mhm,
also was widowed, and they are getting together for lunch.
mm,
So I feel good about that. I can't be in Rochester, New York right now.
yeah,
It's not the easiest place to go to at this time of year, as you know full well.
I do. Yes. Yes. Well, so thoughtful that you called and then help them. If I'm understanding, you helped the two of them reconnect with each other and get together.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that makes me feel really, really good.
Yeah. Thank you, Janet. Anyone else? Okay, well, we're going to then transition from loving kindness into truth. And we've already, with some of the stories, sort of starting to feel out these connections. As we get there, I want to put this within the frame of one of our assumptions that we are driven by the conflict between the evil inclination and the good inclination. And, the evil inclination is oh, it's all about me. And the good inclination is, no, it's actually about the other people. And that's one way that it shows up. Oops, that's not what I wanted to talk about. I think I'm in the wrong. Hang on, I'm going to stop sharing because I think I'm in the wrong slideshow here.
Greg,
Yes,
while you're looking, can I just quote from your book
sure.
for what Sarah was saying? I couldn't figure out how to say it. So one way to execute the judgment of truth is by bringing together the soul traits of truth and loving kindness. And that's what you were talking about, Sarah, how you said, I can be direct, but then you were applying loving kindness and being able to then be direct and truthful. I like reading the book.
That is a great example.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry about this. I don't know what's going on. So, would anyone else care to comment on that or help facilitate for a second while I try to figure this out?
Greg, I will.
Thank you.
So when I read your email and about truth, it is like such an appropriate time for that topic to come up because I feel that I'm a very truthful. Truth to me is honesty, not lying, just, say it, I mean, to be in a loving, kind way of saying things. I feel that I am. But something came up this past week with a friend. And she kind of goes into this pattern of being very defensive and saying that she's very disappointed in our friendship. And so it gets tiring after a while, right? So when you mentioned that example about what do you do of saying to somebody something that may mean something to you or the group, with the body odor and everything, that particular example, I was struggling after I read that is sometimes truth better with nothing said because I have not talked to this person since Sunday.
Mm,
She never goes this long without calling or saying something. So I know it's really, really bothering her.
mm,
I'm trying now to listen to the divine, the universe, to tell me what to do, which
mm,
right now is kind of nothing, but that feels also uncomfortable. Like maybe is it loving kind thing to do to put something out to her like, I'm sorry you're going through a lot, which is what she told me. And it saddens me that uh you find our friendship what did she use? Disappointing.
mm.
Or is the truth better not saying anything at all?
That's kind of that's a question that only you can answer.
Mhm.
It's kind of what's the appropriate thing for this situation. I mean, definitely, too much truth can be hurtful. Um, you know, whether we speak or not. Um, but it is, I guess, what I would say is taking it out of, truth is one lens, but I guess I would sort of zoom out to like the relationship and where, what do you think is best for the relationship? Do you want to continue to invest in it? to listen, to kind of hear her perspective, to give her some space if that's what she needs. There's so many different angles to this, but it sounds very painful. It sounds painful for you, and that's understandable.
I'm not even sure if it's bothersome. It's more bothersome because it's a pattern and I'm kind of over it and tired of it.
Mhm.
So that's why I haven't done anything. But
Mhm.
then when you talk about the truth, if I'm understanding it correctly, there is a very loving, kind way of saying it. But maybe certain situations don't even honor that. I guess that's what I'm kind of feeling is it important to always say like my truth? Because her truth is something totally different.
Yeah,
And yeah, so it's a hard thing sometimes to know, I think, because I'm
absolutely.
usually the one, or I like to be the one at times to go and really work out an issue if there is something with a particular friend. But this one feels really different.
Mhm.
And so that's where I'm kind of a little befuddled of truth versus loving kindness, if that makes sense. I don't.
Yeah, I do, and it is a complicated situation. Paul looks like Paul has his hand up.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic for sure. Um, I was raised to never make a fuss about things, so truth was something I might understand or have a feeling about myself, but confronting somebody with it was something entirely different. And I've come across some things that relate to this recently about um, different kinds of dialogues or different ways of doing dialogue, and dialogue being more than just having two people talking back and forth, but really creating a space where it's possible to sort of really hear from your heart where the person's coming from, because they're the words, but then there's the loving kindness behind the words, right? The words may say one thing, but the heart may have something, a message related to that, but it's going to be maybe different. And so if somebody, so for instance, I know that when people I know, whether it's family or friends, if they're being sharp with me, then it's taken me, I don't know, 69 years of my life to figure out that it's not about me, it's about them. They're the ones that are having a tough day. And so I have to take that into account. That's a loving kindness part of, so their truth is maybe not that I'm being a real idiot. The truth is, their truth is they're having a really tough time with a lot of things and they don't know how to communicate well. So it's sort of, I don't know if that makes sense. And because that's kind of turning a lot of this stuff around, but I think that there's, for me anyway, that's something I've had to come to face with. That, I mean, on the one hand, it's a good thing to know that no, I'm not a poopy head. I'm just being me, and the person's having a tough day. So then, how do I respond to that? So,
Thank you, Paul. Sarah.
Yeah, I like that. Paul, what you said, it reminds me of if somebody's a jerk, you don't have to be a jerk back. You act, in your own shoes. If just because somebody's being mean and horrible, it's hard sometimes not to be defensive, but it's more loving kindness, like what I was thinking as a possible thing that you could say. I mean, I don't know the relationship well enough, but just for example, Nancy, you could say, I'm really sorry you're having a hard time, and is there anything that I can do to support you? So, or I'm really sad that you feel hurt by our relationship. What can I do to make that different? But that's only if you feel like saying that, because if she's, I mean, it has to be from your heart. So that was just, what I was thinking when you were talking about it.
Well, that's funny you say that, Sarah. If I could just piggyback on that, because that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to send a text with those two sentiments, but then I'm like, what Paul said, kind of resonates, that if I understood that was, it's like they're having a bad day. It's really their thing, but it's affecting me not in a hurtful way, but more of a, you really think our friendship is this, you could just like let it go all the time, which she does, and
Well,
then she'll
that's
come back.
that's hurtful. So I mean, it sounds like you're hurt with that. I'd be hurt.
I'm not hurt anymore because it's such a pattern. I'm more, you could live with yourself like this, but then that's not me for me to judge either. But I think what you just said, Sarah, is exactly what I've been struggling with, like saying, I'm really sorry you're having a hard time with whatever you're going through, but I'm here, to discuss, or my heart is open to our friendship or whatever. But it's truth is a really interesting topic, and I'm so glad you brought it to today, because it's just so appropriate, because I think there's some people who it's easier to be really yourself and truthful. It just comes naturally, and there's others that's harder, and she's not an easy one to really come forth.
Yeah, and I think, thank you, Nancy. And I heard you say earlier, and I've been percolating on this a little bit, that there's sort of her perception of what's true and your perception of what's true, and you're trying to kind of hold both of those. And that's something that we've talked about in the past, and we may touch on next week. It's kind of like that, it's a perspective thing. It's not like there's one platonic universal truth that this is what it is. It's like, a snapshot of her perception in time, or her perceptions and your perceptions, and holding that space, gives you perspective from a higher level where you're not in the middle reactive and, oh, how could you say that? Or whatever, you're really trying to be thoughtful and considered on how you respond, or if you respond. See, Toby.
Sometimes the problem arises in that we don't see things the same way. There will be the classic accident is, from my criminal career, if you have a traffic accident and you have 10 witnesses, each one of them is going to have a different view of what happened, and they're not lying, or probably not lying, but they probably just observed something, or because of the way they were raised, what they might have turned their head at the moment that the light turned. There are so many criteria about truth. Is there an objective truth? That's the old, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a noise? Or I think that full quote was, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's around to hear it, does it make a noise? So I think that for speaking personally, I can tell you that just in the last 2 days, I've had a situation where there was only 4 people in the room. I mean, it's not like there were unlimited amount of humans, and it was a distressing situation for all of us, but for different reasons. And we're texting back and forth, trying to figure out, why we're all so upset. And what it turned out to be was a matter of misperception.
Thank you, Toby. Karen.
So for me, using the truth, I often think about what's the outcome that I want, as to how I use my truth, look for someone else's truth, and that there can be more than one truth. And also, that it's really hard to change somebody else and somebody else's thinking. So if is sharing my truth, am I doing it because I want somebody else to change the way they are? And if that's why I'm sharing it, that may not happen.
Mhm.
And so as we're also talking about kindness versus chesed, I still remember for me that kindness is doing something that I think will be perceived as kindness, but chesed is actually trying to find out if what I perceive as kindness is what somebody else would see as a kindness.
Hmm.
So that's my take on how truth and kindness would work for me in a similar situation for myself.
Thank you, Karen. Wendy.
Well, in your book, Greg, you do talk about that absolute truth and put it in the perspective of that we think of truth as a correct representation of an object, event, or feeling. Judaism, however, teaches that the truth is much more complicated because as humans, we can only perceive a fraction of what is happening in the world. Which is that great word observation that one of you just brought up is instead of just telling somebody something because you just know it's the truth, saying something like, I observe, just like your man who went to the person that went to with a bad breath or with a body odor.
Mhm.
When I was thinking about all of that, I said, well, if I tell a person the truth, I might embarrass them. And I wouldn't want to do that. But then I thought, wait a minute, what? Because this tag thing, I think of people always showing people that their tag is up. And I'm always like, why do you care? Why do you care? They're always putting it down or saying your tag's up. So it's like the truth, the tag of truth or whatever. But if somebody was going to go up and speak in front of 100 people and their tag is showing, I might say to the person, your tag is showing. I know that's going to embarrass that person, but in the long run, the person's not going to get up there with their tag showing and then they walk down and 100 people see their tag up. Then they're going to really be embarrassed. So maybe that's like Karen was talking about, putting yourself out of it. It's not about me. It's about the person and what's going to, sometimes you do have to kind of just use your upstairs brain and figure that out.
Yeah.
That's just what I got from your book.
And also in that example, there's our emotionality can get in the way. Oh, I might embarrass them. I might embarrass myself. They might get mad at me. Is this something they need to hear or not? And in this example, some of our conversation was your job as you're a leader of a division of 50 people. You need to set the tone and set the standards for the culture, for what's acceptable, for what's not, and how problems get resolved. And so we could bring in all kinds of different soul traits around this, like, humility. It's like there are ways you can sort of push it off on somebody else, or you can step up and occupy that leadership space where, I need to say something. Can you stop with that? Okay, sorry, the kitten's chewing on the cord. Yeah, Nancy, and then Sarah.
Well, I also had to chuckle about your example because I was in a choir and we had one of our members who was very offensive. I mean, she just walked in the room and we all had to leave, very, very foul body odor.
Mm,
And what happened is that nobody could sit next to her. And she had basically a hygiene problem, but also she was so overweight that
mm,
she couldn't clean herself properly. So
mm,
she had a lot of issues, right?
mm,
But it was left up to the director, our conductor, to actually speak with her. And I'm sure she did it in a very loving, kind way. And it got better. But because she had other issues, she tried to be as best she could. But you do, if you hear so many complaints or feelings from other members, then the leader kind of takes action, and it made a difference. But that kind of situation is a lot different in a way than a one-on-one, but then on the one-on-one, like who was it saying the embarrassing? I think it was Wendy. And there was this woman who was coming down from using the restroom at the other end of the hall, and she had a paper trail of toilet paper out of her backside, and it was about 5 feet long. I mean, it wasn't, it was like, and I thought, you know what? She may be embarrassed, but someone has to tell her. And I
Right.
pulled her over to the side and I said, I think you need to turn around, go back to the bathroom, take care of yourself. So, but there's just all these situations that come up that,
Yeah.
you really have to be honest or truthful about certain things, but then, the other. So I just wanted to share those two stories. It was kind of funny.
Thank you. Yeah, Sarah.
So I think that this might have come up in our last round of this soul trait, but there's this thing that I learned in recovery, and it's an acronym called THINK. Is it thoughtful, honest, intelligent, necessary, and kind?
Mhm.
And sometimes, for me, everybody's different. So some people tend to not speak up and stuff, but I tend to speak up. And so for me, I have to learn how I have to apply that. And I'm in a newish relationship with a man, and we have clashes periodically, and and it's almost like a power struggle. He wants to show me how smart he is, and I want to show him how smart I am, and it's like, I don't want to fight, and
Mhm.
and and sometimes I have to keep my mouth shut. I mean, I don't have to, bring up things that bother me, and I mean, just because I observe something, I don't have to tell him everything that's going on in my mind,
Mhm.
because then, we can often have a debate about it, or whatever. And, I'm just learning how to be more quiet, and sometimes honesty or kindness or thoughtfulness for me is by me listening more
Mm.
and, not feeling like I always have to get my point of view across, you know. So
Yeah.
that's just something that I have to work on.
Well, glad to hear you're dating somebody too, and sounds like you're being very, very thoughtful. It's like, woohoo! Yeah. Um, so, okay, so I'm trying to figure out where to go from here. I have come up with the slides, and I was going to have us, let me just pull the group. So I was going to have us like talk about the issue of the email in our breakout rooms, but we've kind of been covering that a little bit. Do we want to kind of have a different topic for the breakout rooms, or do you want to kind of go a little bit deeper? Does anyone have a perspective on this? Yeah, Wendy?
I'm just thinking your book does actually have two maybe perspectives. The one was when you mentioned that in Japan, sometimes
Wait,
doctors.
hang on just a sec. No, I don't mean like, do we want, I was just asking more like, should we do what I planned for the breakout room
Oh,
around around the email about the body odor issue, or do we feel like we've already covered that? Yeah.
uh,
Paul?
Yeah, so I think that the body odor issue is just an example, and I think that it's a really useful I don't know, example to bring up those difficult conversations we would like to have or did have, and it was, either went well or it didn't go well, one of the two. But I think it's useful. So I would be in favor of that instead of, I think we can go deep with that, is what I'm trying to say. It's not just talking about that one example and that's it. That's how I would look at it.
Okay. All right, well, let's look at, I'm going to do one more slide here, and then we'll go into breakout rooms. I'm going to save that for another time. let's go to the spectrum diagram, because we've been talking about truth, and I think that this is an important piece of the puzzle. Let's see if I can get to, there we go. So we've talked about, we've touched on a lot of pieces of this, like we haven't talked so much about falsehood, and maybe we'll talk about that more next week. And we're talking about flavors of the, differing perspectives or tempering truth with kindness. But and we've kind of talked about this kind of area over here where if we're giving too much truth, it can be hurtful speech, or it can be hurtful. There's not enough kindness. And in the example, this was how, being able to directly share with someone something that was uncomfortable, but in a kind way. And is that directness in itself a kindness? But there's also another piece where if there's too little truth, that can erode trust. And as we talked about in some of our past sessions, trust is really fundamental for relationship. It's fundamental for the world. So maybe I'm going to put up the breakout room thing, but one thing that you can maybe add to that is how this approach either built trust or undermined trust in their relationship. And also, in the example, I didn't include this in the email, the manager had noticed that this person was alone quite a bit and that there weren't other people around them, whereas usually there were kind of big groups of people. So there was kind of an implication that maybe other people were noticing this as well. So first and foremost, put in the chat the prompt. And I added that question, how does this approach build or undermine trust? And now let me create the breakout rooms. Ooh. Okay, the rooms are open.
What were you gonna say?
Uh,
Maybe
I'll,
you-
I'll,
Okay.
it was fine. I was just gonna blabber on about something else, so it's fine.
Well, welcome back. And I'm curious, does anyone have anything they want to share from their discussion? Did anybody touch on this issue of trust? What came up? What additional insights, if any? Yes, Nancy.
Well, I hope I say this right, but one thing is that there's certain situations, like my example of the woman who I worked with the toilet paper running down
Yeah,
down the hall, that you really do need to pull the person aside and, whisper or in a very nice way, this is what I'm observing. You may want to go back or something. So
yes,
there's certain things, and it's very easy to be very truthful in
yeah,
that sense. Then there's the other that are more, is there any truth? And what is the truth? Because my truth may be different than your truth.
Yeah.
And so again, it's that perspective. So kind of do what feels good for you, but this is all an illusion. And how do we know that what is really happening is really truthful? You know, especially when it comes to a relationship that you know, but when it's somebody else that you could point out, like, oh, you have something, you know, whatever, you know, when you can
Yeah.
point out something directly, it's easier than when it's a friendship or a relationship, depending on how much trust you have. And I have had to build that with my husband, and I could be so honest and truthful now, whereas it took me years. But there's other people in my family that I cannot be as truthful because of their reaction and their perception.
Yeah. Thank you, Nancy. Really good way to kind of bring out some of the nuance and subtleties and complexities. Janos.
Well, I just want to share a short quote from my favorite author that, well, you need to aim to tell the truth or at least not to lie.
Hmm. Yeah. Thank you. Eliana.
Hi. We're kind of touched on motivation, and I and the importance of what is the motivation for correcting or helping somebody? Is it because they bother you?
Mhm.
Is it's like who was saying that saying, is it hurtful, that thing?
Mhm.
Is it coming because you're making a judgment on them, or is it something that they need for their existence? You know, it's a fine line, and I don't know how, since I'm retired and alone and I don't have to be in groups much, it's hard for me to say how I would react in those situations, but it always has to be from the heart, not the ego, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. In Nancy's example and in this example, there was a really important element of sort of pulling the person to the side. Like you could truthfully have in the middle of the room, it's like, hey, so and so, take a shower already. Or, hey, look who is playing with the toilet paper today. I mean, that's sort of on the cruel, side. But there's taking a very thoughtful, kind approach and pulling the person to the side is I think an important part of the picture. Karen.
This is a very different perspective, but it's an anecdote that I've known for many years. And so I just wanted to share it here.
Please.
In a kindergarten classroom, after lunch, one of the children says, somebody stole my watch, maybe brought for show and tell, whatever it is. And nobody would admit to it. They're like, I didn't do it. I didn't take it. And the teacher lined up all the kids, their jackets on. They just come in from, I guess, the playground. And she said she was going to go through each of the kids' pockets to see if she could find out who took the watch. And she did that. And at some point going through the line, she found the watch. But she didn't stop and say anything. She finished the entire line. She went through everybody's pockets. And then she turned to them and she said, I have the watch and I'm returning it to you. And there wasn't a reason to shame, and this was with young children, to shame that young child, but it was reason for a lesson. And the story goes that years later, this student came back to the teacher and said, by the way, that was such a great lesson. And thank you for not embarrassing me and shaming me. And it's helped to shape who I am today. So it's not an adult story here, but it's a different way of finding out a truth and whether or not we use that information or how we use that information.
Thank you so much, Karen. And that is such a great illustration of how important it is to deliver the truth with kindness. And as we've talked about kindness, if you think of kindness as a foundation of the world, and we've all been like had our lives changed by a kind word or a kind deed, or um, and that really is huge. So thank you. Paul.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen. That was really great. I think another aspect of that to me is that, as we've been talking about, there are many different truths that might come out, where there might be different kinds of truths that would be seen by different people. And I'm volunteering with a group of people here on the Cape, and we're looking at equitable housing, and we're putting together some materials to bring to the town board. And so we have a lot of different perspectives, and they're all true. And sort of understanding what the motivations are. We've got somebody who's lived here their whole lives, so they have a certain truth and a lot of feelings about it. There's others like myself who've been here for less than 10 years, and so I've got a perspective on it. And so these are all true, but which are the ones that are that are the truest true, I suppose. And the example with the teacher is, what is the true thing that has a lot of integrity as well. I think that's, there's truth without integrity, and there's truth with integrity, and maybe that's a way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, I'm going to paste in the chat now our actions, possible actions for truth, and for our practice for this week. Our mantra is be distant from falsehood. So these actions: practice humility to overcome fear of judgment, or practice trust to overcome the fear of telling the truth. Evaluate the truth tolerance at your employer or in a organization that you're a part of. Are they always spinning things, or do they punish people for being too direct? Be mindful that your truth may not be the only truth, as Paul was just talking about. And practice patience to bear the burden of waiting for what you want until you can achieve it without shading the truth. That could apply to a lot of the stories we talked about today, bringing patience to bear, while you decide how you want to respond. And then, of course, distancing yourself from falsehood, which could mean a lot of different things. And we'll talk about that more next week. So for right now, it is time for our closing meditation. So I invite you once again to close your eyes and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And now allow yourself to just start breathing in a leisurely way. Gentle inhales and gentle exhales. Let's feel that connection that we share across the country as we walk together on this journey. And know that in truth, we are not alone. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes.